Thanks for that, Tanvi. Really appreciate. So I think you have already covered my introduction. I'll just probably go with the next part of today's session. So I see like there are a few folks who have joined today. Before I share my screen and then directly go with what we want to discuss today, if someone of you can just quickly maybe help me understand like what is that you are expecting from today's session. I see like you have compromised your Sunday afternoon nap and then on a lazy Sunday afternoon attended this session, right? So definitely you are seeking some takeaways, right, after attending this session. So can someone of you just quickly let me know, like, what is your expectation before you join this session, or what is that you want to learn today?
Hi, sir. I think like to learn something new, something about the industry. I mean, we are getting some knowledge like about the core MBA, but what exactly is happening in the industry, a little bit more about that, maybe. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Anyone else? Okay, so maybe I'll just start. So I think Tanvi has already given a introduction about myself, but I just wanted to add one layer. So after completing my MBA from Indore, I graduated in 2021. I had the very good opportunity to join Yum Brands, right? And why I say it was a very good opportunity is I feel that was the very right time to join a QSR industry. It was just the onset of digital transformations, right? So if you see, typically how QSRs used to perform earlier is like there was a chain of restaurants. They used to have a very small IT team just to do a plug and play of the POS applications and set the operations, right? But then post pandemic, people realized that this offline setup is not going to continue for long. We need to build a omni-channel platform so that we can deliver the same customer experience across channels, whether it be an online delivery app, whether somebody is visiting our outlets, whether purchasing from a third-party aggregator. So I got a very good opportunity to cut my teeth across multiple domains in Yum Brands, right? So I steered initiatives across app, website, in-store applications such as kiosk, POS, and also certain digital transformations such as implementing the delivery management system, right? Or transition from normal SMS to WhatsApp as a communication medium, building marketing technologies such as Breeze, Branch.io to have stronger customer brand relationships, right? That's how we send communications to our customers, measure the marketing effectiveness using Branch.io, which is an attribution tool. So these are all those things which I got an opportunity to steer at Yum Brands. And then recently, I think an year back, I transitioned into a fintech industry, which is like if you heard about GyFTR, like it's the largest issuer of closed loop gift PPIs in India, right? So we partner with more than 250 brands across India, where customers can purchase the brand gift vouchers and then redeem that across a brand website or an app, or even at offline setups, maybe for that matter, the outlets, right? So here I manage a team and then I lead both sides of the business, right? As I mentioned, like one is like the issuer journey where we are actually where customer is actually purchasing a gift card. The second is when they're trying to redeem that gift card, right? So I manage a team here, and then I think that's how it's been as of now. I'll share my screen, and then we'll quickly go through what I wanted to present today, right? One second. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So, is there anyone in this group who has actually worked upon early product roles or have some experience about maybe a product analyst, or what exactly does a product manager do? Do anyone have such experience? Can someone come up?
Um, I think like whenever there is a new feature you want to develop, they would work on the feature and come up with all the possible solutions for that.
Hmm.
That is one of the thing, and also like if the existing features are there, how to enhance the existing features of an app per se. Like it could be an app or like it could be a product, a normal product too. So I
Yes.
mean, I think a product manager for tech would be different and uh, a regular product would be different than
Yes, I
right.
think you're very, very close, right? So, if you see, this is how product management looks beyond the LinkedIn glamour, right? So if you just go a decade back, in fact, when I started my career, right, we don't used to call ourselves as product managers. I was part of the marketing team, but it was a blend of both product and marketing, right? So I'll start with the problem statement. How it used to happen is like, assume that your app is not working, right? You're not able to generate revenue out of that app. Then the business team would say, like, see, our application doesn't work. Our competitors are having better platforms. Our customers are dropping off. That's why we are not to be able to bring revenue for the business. While the technology team will say, hey, look, our application is far better than our competitors. And if there are two lines of business, they may say, like, see, the same team is working across both of these product lines. How is one particular application working good while the other is not? And then one fine day, they both may have a discussion and say, like, okay, let's build a feature. This will solve the problem. And ultimately, you see, like, nothing, no needle got moved. Now, this problem gets addressed when you have someone new in the team, which we call as the product manager. So the product manager sits at the intersection of customer, business, and technology to deliver scalable value. Now, when I say it is an intersection of all these things, you'll have constraints always in your system, right? There can be technical technology constraints, there can be marketing constraints, like I don't have enough budget for this quarter, or maybe we don't have that technology in our pipeline, or maybe we don't have adequate customer data to take a decision. Now, basis all of those constraints, right, you need to find like what is the best solution that we can bring in to meet certain customer requirements. And in many cases, it may so happen that you are not solving something for the customer. Maybe it is something for your in-house team also. Maybe your finance team is not able to do a reconciliation, or your business team doesn't have any customer insights. So it can be any problem. In most cases, it is a customer problem which is getting solved. But in many cases, it may also happen that you're solving something for your own business or your own technology team. So the primary five pillars of product management are problem discovery, prioritization, stakeholder alignment, execution, and outcome. So we'll start with problem discovery, right? So if you see, you need to identify like which are the customer problems that you are trying to solve, right? These are not features. If you just term this as features, then maybe you will just build them, but that may not actually lead some impact, right? And then since you are currently graduating, you must know the difference between needs and wants, right? So that is how the prioritization comes into play. So once we have identified that this is the problem that we are trying to solve, and which can come from multiple sources of truth, it can be your own, CRM metrics, it can be your app feedbacks, it can be, a social media complaint, it can be GA, it can be your own ops records. Basis that you have identified that there are 5 or 7 problems that I need to solve. Now, the next job of a product manager would be to prioritize that, right? Which one to deliver first, because as we started, there are multiple constraints in the system that we also need to look into. So there are industry-known frameworks which are followed. One amongst that is the ICE framework, which is pretty simple and straightforward. You just see like what is the impact I'm driving, how much confident am I that if I make this change, it will actually lead to an impact, and what is the ease, right? So how easy I can or how quickly I can deliver this. Basis these 3 parameters, you make a ranking: first, second, third, fourth, fifth. That this is first, this is something that I want to build first, followed by second, third, fourth, and fifth. Now, if you see in this framework, we are missing one point, which is the reach, right? Then comes the RISE framework, which also takes into consideration the reach that I'm trying to make. So how many customers will this application reach, right? And then accordingly, you also measure like what is the impact I'm trying to make, how confident I am that with this change, I'll actually make this change happen. And then what is the effort that I'm putting into it, right? So now you also consider the impact versus effort mapping. So I should ideally prioritize a feature which will have larger impact with a very small effort, right? Because with a quick small development, I can actually move the needle that, okay, my customer acquisition has moved by 20%, or my revenue has moved by 5%. So now we are taking into consideration both impact and effort. The third framework is the Moscow framework, which is like must do, should do, can do, and won't do. This is like preparing a laundry list of things which you want to do, and then accordingly make a roadmap out of that, and accordingly decide the backlogs. Like, okay, in this particular sprint, I want to prioritize these 2 features because these are must-do features. These are should do, like it is good to have those features. Can do is something like, yeah, it's okay because we can actually build something new in the market. And won't do is something that we'll never do, right? So these are pretty simple frameworks which are used in the industry for doing a prioritization. Now coming to the stakeholder alignment part. Now if you see, you have identified the problem, you have also made a prioritization, but now we haven't aligned it with the stakeholders, right? So stakeholder alignment is very key in any organization. Otherwise, what would happen is eventually after you have half baked the product, you have gone to certain extent, but then you will see like maybe your CPO is not aligned, or your CTO is not aligned, or your CEO is not aligned, and then all those efforts that you have made till time will go in waste, right? So stakeholder alignment is very important whenever you are actually doing any new product development. Execution ownership, which I already covered earlier, like this is that person in the team who has to manage the entire execution of the roadmap, right? There can be blockers, there can be impediments, there can be new challenges which may come up, but then you have to actually mitigate all those challenges and then ensure that the product or the feature gets rolled out in the intended timeline. And then the final part is the outcome measurement, right? So whenever you're trying to do anything new, just mention like this is what I'm trying to do and this needs to be done beforehand, right? Otherwise what would happen is every new feature may seem like a success, right? Okay, we have built a new feature and we are successful, but then if you already align on the success criteria against each new feature, then you'll be able to actually attribute that whether this change did any at all attributed to any improvement, or it was just a waste of time and effort. So these are the primary 5 pillars of product management and should be considered whenever you're doing a new change or maybe doing some transition from some there is already a product available in the market. You're trying to do some enhancements on top of that. I'll just take a quick pause here if you have any questions till now. Otherwise, I'll move forward with my discussion. Okay, let me proceed forward in that case. Now, this scalability pyramid, right? The thing which we want to stress in today's discussion also, like how do we make products scalable? So if you see, the most of the products which are built in the market, they fail because we haven't considered the scale factor while developing this new feature. Maybe we thought that it is only for one particular brand, or maybe a handful of customers, or maybe for a certain geography. But then whenever we want to scale that new feature or development over other to a different cohort or to a different geography, we feel that there's a fundamental difference or a fundamental um, the fundamental needs to be changed again or built from scratch. So if you just directly jump into automating that feature, that product is gonna fail. So as they say, like if you automate chaos, you will just get more or faster chaos, right? So every layer in this pyramid that you see assumes that the one below that layer is stable, right? So you cannot build a process if the feature is not built well. You cannot build a system if the process is shaken. And in fact, the controls and automation also depends or relies that the layer beneath that is stable. So I'll give you a few examples to understand this. Features are like local solutions, right, which we build, right? Now this process which we are talking about, this makes these features repeatable outcomes, right? Example are release checklist. Assume like you've built a new feature. So after you do a fresh deployment, you always have a release checklist. You record every new incident, right? You have a customer escalation flow in place. You have already defined the success criteria. Then you have a robust process in place so that every new feature which gets rolled out meets the intended purpose. Now, systems are like decision architectures which sit on top of the process layer, right? Which includes organization structure, it can be a technical architecture or data flows and pipelines. Control system sits on top of the system layer, and then it controls that the entire product life cycle meets the actually follows the path which is intended for. So there would be SLAs in place, there can be approval systems, and you already know that maybe few SLAs take time, few approval processes take time. So you accordingly take into consideration all of those controls into place and frame the software development life cycle of the product. On the top and the final layer sits the automation layer, which actually amplifies the maturity. So the automation works only well if the feature is proven, if the process is clear, if the system is stable and the controls are defined. And as they say, like scalability is not growth if it's not sustainable repeatability. So basically in this pyramid, what we're trying to say is like all of these processes or systems or controls that we have in place should have their own guardrails so that we can build a scalable product whenever we're trying to build one. Moving forward, I think basis the all the fundamentals that were learned about product manager and how a product management team actually works, we'll now try to delve into how a QSR performs, right? So as I was saying some time back, if you see like earlier, if you typically go to a restaurant, you'll see like they had paper menu books, right? You just someone comes to you and collects your order, but then we have transitioned from that state. And now, if you see, every QSR company is actually functioning like a tech company which is selling food, right? They have their native application. They have a very omni-channel experience across offline and online setups. And then when you try to do this, you need to ensure like everything and anything which includes to deliver quality food to your customer needs to be taken care of. Now, if I just start with the journey, when someone tries to place an order, right, you need to have a very good UI UX, faster and robust payment systems so that you can collect the payment without failures. And then once the order is placed, you already communicated that your order will get delivered in next 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And this SLA is getting reduced with every day, right? Now the expectations have even dropped that the food needs to get delivered within 15 minutes. 30 minutes still seem like a long duration now, right? So you have to meet the market standards also and ensure that the kitchen operations, the supply chain operations, right, your back of house systems or the forecasting systems in your store are also accordingly getting upgraded so that you can deliver a uniform experience to your customer every time they come to your outlet, right? So if you see here, we are talking about a delivery app, right? Where customer has placed a few orders and then the order needs to be get delivered within next 15-20 minutes. So I'll just highlight how it actually functioned in Yum Brands, because this is something which I had steered end to end, right? So my learnings from the past is like ops reality is the key, right? And we were often encouraged that you should visit the store until and unless you visit the store, certain things you may feel like it's working fine, but once you visit the store you understand that the pieces are broken, right? Speed is better than perfection. As I mentioned, if the market standards are changing, right, if the customer expectations are changing, you need to maintain pace with those changing market conditions and then accordingly try to be in a better position, right? And adoption is cultural, right? As I mentioned, like having an alignment across all hierarchies in the business and among all the functions is very key when you're trying to develop anything new. For example, I'll take two cases, right? Launching delivery management system at KFC. So if you see how it started was like KFC has two major franchisee partners, and we also had like around 10 to 15 equity stores in Hyderabad. So anything and everything that we try to do anything new, we first test it in our equity stores, try to identify what are the challenges, what are the opportunity areas, and accordingly, when we are very confident that everything is working as intended, then we scale that product across other franchisee outlets also. So when we tested this at the equity stores, which was like handful of 10, 15 stores, everything seemed very perfect, right? Like, okay, we are getting the order, we are able to identify those delivery orders, we are actually sending those orders to our riders. They're coming to our outlets, picking up the food, and then delivering those orders. But when we try to scale that product across 1,000+ KFC outlets, we identified some challenges, right? So what happened was, if you see the delivery industry, right, is very fragmented in the sense like Shadowfax may be, you may have Shadowfax riders in the north, you may have a different aggregator in the east, you can have a completely different aggregator in the south. right? Now we had integrations with only a few handful of aggregator players, right? We used to work in a dedicated rider model. So basically there were riders assigned to every store. But when we tried to scale this product across multiple outlets, we found that we don't have enough orders. Maybe the rider is sitting idle at the store for 5 hours. And then since it bears some cost, then the franchisee partners came and told us, hey, look, we don't have adequate orders. How do I keep those riders at my outlets? Then we had to think of something like a marketplace model where we outsource the delivery system to aggregators in the system like Shadowfax or Now Delivery, right? And then we also found certain challenges that every aggregators had their own unique tech bandwidths. They had their own UI UX. So every time our order was getting routed to a different aggregator, the customer experience was changing, right? And then this was actually the onset of those areas, right, which I covered earlier. Like if you try to build some automations or you try to build certain process, the fundamentals need to be very clear. So these were certain learnings that I had in the past, and then which actually attribute to how do you make the product more scalable or more robust, right? We managed to address this problem, but it took some time for us to deliver a uniform experience for all the customers every single time, right? The second case which I like to touch upon is like if you typically go to outlets today, like McDonald's or KFC, you'll see like in-store digital ordering machines, right? Earlier, you have to go to the counter and then ask for your order, but now if you go to these outlets, you'll see like they have in-store self-ordering kiosk machines. So we also wanted to expand our digital outreach, and then we actually started installing these kiosks at every outlet. So now, if you go to any KFC, you'll definitely, I feel like you'll get to see this kiosk. We have penetrated even to tier two, tier three cities now. So when we tried to launch this, right, it was an added infra cost for the franchisee partners. There was no ROI that was attributed to this. Like, okay, if I actually put in this much of cost, then what is the ROI that I'm getting? Because I anyways have a in-store person who can actually take this order on behalf of the customer. And then my UI UX was also not that clean. It was just a black box which was actually taking orders on behalf of the cashier. There were certain payment issues also. So the payment used to get deducted from the customer's end. However, the order was not confirmed. There was no auto refund, which actually stopped uh, which from scaling this kiosk application across outlets. So people lost confidence. We found like the restaurant managers themselves used to shut down this kiosk. But then over time, what we did is we did some secondary research. We did computer benchmarking. We also did a shared research with Deloitte, right? And then tried to find out like what is that which is hindering adoption in tier one cities versus tier two cities versus tier three cities, because every geography had their own unique challenges, right? You cannot club them into a single bucket, right? So the primary things which came out of that study was like payment was a big barrier, right? People were not confident doing a payment on the in-store kiosk. They used to feel like my payment will go through, but what if my order doesn't get fulfilled? It is always very safe to do a payment in front of someone, right? So that if anything goes wrong, then I can actually check with that person like, okay, I have done a payment in front of you. Now you are responsible to manage this. So we did some research out of that, and then of course we did a bunch of technical integrations to solve this problem. So in quick 3 to 4 months, we could actually solve that payment issue with the help of dynamic QR, right? With doing our integrations with Paytm. So now if you go to any KFC outlet, if you want to place an order on kiosk, you will see like the UPI doesn't get collected on the EDC machine. You'll get to see a QR code appearing on the kiosk screen itself. You can simply scan that QR from your app and then confirm the payment. So it reduced the number of payment failures. It increase the trust and confidence among customers, and not only customers, of the store champions also. So in quick 3 to 5 months, we could see like our adoption grew like anything at the outlets. From something around 30%, we could reach to more than 70-75%, and we were actually clocking more than 40,000 orders every day from kiosk. And then from a business standpoint, if you see why we actually wanted to launch this in-store kiosk, of course, this was giving us quality customer data so that we can reach out to our customers for repeat transactions, loyalty initiatives, all of that. Secondly, we wanted to promote KFC as a digital brand, right? So it expanded our digital outreach. Third, it was also giving us ROIs in the sense that we were getting APC uplifts of around 10 to 12% if someone ordered from kiosk, right? So the help of quick nudges on the screen like upselling or cross-selling, if someone is selecting maybe a small burger, we used to nudge that customer saying like just pay 10 rupees more or 20 rupees more and uh, add a Coke or a beverage to it. And that is how we were actually trying to increase the average per order, right? The APC or the AOB as we talk about. And then we could fulfill that additional infra cost which franchisee partners were putting in, installing these kiosk applications at outlets. So these were two basic learnings that I had during my tenure in Yum Brands, and I feel like this is how actually we could start from scratch and then build something which is scalable and robust. Any questions as of now?
No, sir. Understood.
Okay, moving next. If you see how is the current food tech industry landscape looks like, I mean, though it's a fragmented market, but you see at a global level, it's valued at around $250 billion. India is one of the fastest growing markets with currently valued, if I'm not wrong, close to $30 billion. The digital ordering and the aggregator dominance, of course, is getting increased day by day. It's a duopoly, as we all know. But at the same time, there are many small players who are emerging in the market with new value propositions, like new customer offerings, which is actually asking the existing players also to rethink like how do we define the organization strategy or our digital strategy so that we can gain a toehold in this new food tech industry landscape. I think there is a lot of focus on unit economics here. If you see, like if I'm getting a revenue of around maybe $1,000 from an order, there are certain fixed costs attached to that, right? There are platform fees, there are delivery costs, there are discounts and offers which I'm running, and then whether I'm having some margin out of that so that I can have a sustainable growth, right? Sustainable growth is very important. Though this market is fragmented, the margins are reducing, but at the same time, we need to ensure like there is the unit economics are in place so that there is a overall growth that we can plan for. And as in other sectors, food tech industry is also getting revolutionized using AI, right? So I'll give you a typical example of how AI shaped the customer journey at KFC. So we had actually built a recommendation engine, right? So we took data for last 2 years, tried to see like what are the different trends which are emerging out of that data. We took factors like weekdays, time of the day, right, seasonal variations, festivals, and then accordingly recommended a few products for every customer, right? So basis the customer mobile number, we could actually fetch the order histories, and also with the macro factors which are like what typically gets sold on those outlets or in those geographies, we could actually give a targeted recommendation to the customer saying like why don't you buy this, right? So it actually reflected in two areas. One is of course higher revenue, and second also the ordering time. So earlier the ordering time on the kiosk was close to 4 minutes, right? But then we could reduce that ordering time to 2.5 minutes, because as you understand, like it's an in-store ordering channel, right? So there is a queue formation that is happening. So we need to ensure like someone who comes to the kiosk can easily place the order and allow the next customer to order again. So personalization is the key in the current food tech industry. And then of course, AI is shaping, like AI has given us all those arms and legs to do the necessary, you know, uh, uh, necessary recommendations that we need to put so that we can have a very unique personalized experience for every customer. And then optimization in terms of forecasting, right? So there are certain ways in which we can actually make the forecasting more robust, right? So as I mentioned, that there are seasonal variations which come in, there are festivals, there are certain macro factors also, maybe something odd comes in the news, right? And then that actually impacts the entire sales. So we need to have a very focused and optimized forecasting channel so that we can actually preempt, like this is exactly the sales that I am expecting from this outlet or from this chain of outlets, and accordingly reduce the wastages, right? So I think AI is actually helping brands to do this revolution in food tech, and at the same time ensure that we have a sustainable margin in every order. Moving to the fintech, I think fintech actually has the same set of problems, only the platform gets changed, right? So if you see post pandemic, right, there is a massive surge in digital adoption that has happened, right? So I'll just leave this question to every one of you. Can anyone just tell me, like, why do you really feel that digital adoption or UPI adoption increased after the pandemic? Any early thoughts?
I mean, like, we were not able to go out and make the payments physically. So definitely we needed a digital thing. There should be a no contact uh, payment platform. So yeah.
Yeah, I think perfectly said, right? Of course, there was something like a forced behavior, right? So we didn't had any option, right? There was lockdown, banks were shut, so there was people were forced to adopt this new way of making a payment. At the same time, it was contactless, so there was no threat. Like it seemed like if you're exchanging any currency notes, maybe there is a threat. But if you're actually doing a UPI transaction, there is no threat. So that's also a motivation for a customer to actually opt for a digital way of payment. Third is it was very simple to use, right? You don't need to put any credit card numbers. In fact, anyone who has a mobile phone can actually scan a UPI QR code and make a UPI payment. So it was simple to use. Merchants also adopted these QR codes. If you see, like earlier, where there was only cash exchange that was happening, but over a few weeks or months, we could see like every merchant had a QR code in place, right? And then there was certain government and regulatory push also, like there was no MDR charges on UPI, right? And over time, what happened is like it became a habit for every customer, like because you're actually doing a UPI transaction across platforms now, right? Not only at a grocery store, right? So this is how I think post pandemic we have seen a huge surge in digital adoption, particularly in the UPI space. And then we have also seen rise of neobanks or buy now pay later options, which are giving added flexibility for a customer, right, to make any kind of a payment. As we all agree, like India's fintech adoption has been higher than the world average, right? The number of UPI transactions have touched over 100 billion in a single year. So, along with all of this, enhancements or changes that we are seeing, there are certain regulatory or operational realities which also needs to be taken care of from a product standpoint also, right? Because in the fintech space, everything and anything is getting governed, right, by the RBI. So if I talk about gifter also, there are two kinds of gift cards which get issued, right? One is what we call as the closed loop gift cards, which are specific to a brand in concern. For example, take example of Make My Trip, or for instance, any brand pantaloons. So these are actually brand specific gift cards, right? Which doesn't need a PPI license. But if you talk about other brands which come under the ambit of semi-closed loop, right? For instance, Amazon, right? Tata Click, then you need to have a PPI license in place to issue gift cards on behalf of that brand. So there are always regulatory and operational guidelines which are laid down by RBI. So whenever you're trying to develop a new product, right, you need to actually take into consideration all of those guidelines. Otherwise, what would happen is eventually you'll see that those product cannot be scaled. And one classic example is the Paytm history. So do any one of you know like what happened with Paytm, how they resolved that issue, what were the RBI challenges they faced? Anyone has any idea about what is the challenge Paytm faced earlier? Okay, so maybe I'll just try to explain. So what happened was like Paytm was stopped operating the Paytm Payments Bank, right? So there were some KYC related issues due to which RBI had stopped their wallets. So if you see like all those FASTags, the payments, Paytm Payment Bank, along with the wallet was stopped by RBI because there were certain guidelines which were not being abided. Then Paytm quickly adopted to the new way of working, which is actually how Google Pay or other phone pay works. So they moved to a issuer bank model where actually the banks are getting maintained at HDFC or SBI or Yes Bank. They are only managing the UI UX part, right, or the distribution part of that. So that is one classic example. Like whenever trying to build something in the fintech industry, the regulatory and operational realities needs to be taken care of. And then, as we discussed in QSR, I think AI is also impacting how fintech is currently operating. There are certain fraud and risk control measures which are getting taken care of. While it was also considered earlier, but with recent changes, it has become more effective, right? So basically, from a user journey, you can actually identify whether this is a fraud user or a genuine user, with the type of transaction they are trying to make, right? The time of the day, right? Typically, assume someone is trying to do a payment at 3 p.m. at 3 a.m. at the night, right? And also maybe a transaction worth amount 5 lakh rupees. So all of those checks and balances are getting now met. There are certain risk rules which are applied at the back end, right, to identify like whether this particular user is a genuine user or a fraud user. So if I talk about Vouchergram or Gifter, we also partner with a firm called SurePass, right, for with help of which we are trying to get the customer information. So whenever a new customer gets registered on our platform, we are actually trying to do some kind of a background check to identify whether this customer is a genuine customer or a fraud user. Accordingly, we can define the limits of that customer. We can define certain rules for that customer. And also, I think apart from risks, what typically happens in fintech is you partner with a bunch of payment gateways, right? So if there is a downtime or a server issue you witness at one particular platform, you can quickly switch the traffic to a different platform so that the end users customers experience doesn't get impacted. So I think AI is also defining how current risk rules are getting applied, how we are actually trying to address current fraud and mitigate risks in the fintech sector. I'll just move next. As I mentioned, like in fintech, trust is everything, right? So if someone loses trust in the product, as I highlighted also in case of Yum Brands, when we actually started the kiosk operation, the payments was a big challenge, right? So slowly customers and team members were losing trust in the product. So even if there is one single payment failure, it leads to some trust issues. So this is the first rule that we need to always consider, that we actually bolster the trust in the product that we're trying to deliver. And then compliance, as I mentioned, like compliance drives the roadmap, right? Every feature may not be for growth, and sometimes it's true that less is more. You don't need to bring a lot of features in the market, but whatever, and you build something new, ensure that the feature actually abides with the compliance and regulatory norms laid down by the RBI. And then third is like edge cases define the quality. The happy path will always seem easy, right? So out of 100 transactions, you'll see like 90 got through. But those 10 transactions which failed define the edge cases or the narrow cases which needs to be considered. And the role of a product manager is actually to outline those narrow cases, preempt and think of what exactly can get wrong when I try to scale this product to newer geographies for a larger cohort. And then I'll highlight the refund and reconciliation logic that we have built, right? So what earlier used to happen is if a payment doesn't go through, right, At that point in time, we didn't have the information about the payment status. So we used to keep the customer for hold that allow us 15 minutes to get back with the refund status or the payment status. But that was a not good experience for the customer, right? Because they need to identify whether they need to go or proceed with a new payment or wait. I mean, whether this order is confirmed or failed. With newer technologies and how we redefine our tech stack is like we get instant refund messages. There are webhooks or callback URLs through which we get an instant refund status, and accordingly, intimate or pass on this status to the customers also. The reconciliation has also become pretty simpler, right? Earlier we had to wait for at least 48 hours to get the reconciliation report and then accordingly do a settlement with the merchants or the clients. But now with newer technologies and the changes that we have done, the reconciliations are also pretty straightforward, right? So I think these are my learnings from the fintech sector, whether it be GyFTR or my earlier experience doing payment integrations while I was in Yum as well. I'll quickly move forward. Now we have covered like what's the role of a product manager, what are the different constraints, the challenges, and the opportunities. At the same time, we covered like how typically the food tech industry has transitioned over the last 10 years. We have seen like how AI is reshaping the food tech industry. And then we also touched upon like what are the different challenges or the RBI regulatory guidelines in the fintech industry, right? Now, I think in general, if I talk about product management, I think AI is rewriting the playbook for us, right? So there are multiple AI tools available like Claude, Gemini, or GPT, which we can use, and in fact, everyone, and it makes more sense for product managers because we need to deal with a lot of, data every day, lot of documents, lot of wireframes, designs, so I think expectations are changing every day, right? A task which used to take one day earlier, now we people are expecting, or the leaderships are expecting, that needs to be concluded or completed within next 15-20 minutes. And then there is no option. It's not a choice that whether we want to adopt AI or not, right? It's a necessity. And I think like with regular use, I've also found it very easy, and in fact it has increased productivity like anything, right? So you can use ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or any other LLM assistants for ideation, writing PRDs, meeting summaries, competitive research, secondary research, or even in fact you're trying to explore product strategies. So it leads to faster synthesis, pattern detection, and automated PRDs. There are certain other tools also which product managers typically use, which is like the product board to help organize priorities, track progresses, and align teams. You can actually create a team in product board. You can include your tech team, you can include your QA team, the business teams, and accordingly help organize the priorities for better alignment. Miro AI I use mostly for making wireframes or sticky notes, mind maps when you're actually trying to, think of a situation, trying to come up with a solution. Then I think it's an important tool for making summaries or wireframes. Notion AI is gaining importance for smarter writing assistant, PRDs, meeting notes, and structured documentation. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, like for personalization, I think recommendation engines, credit scoring in the fintech industry, these are areas which are gaining importance, right, with AI. Now, to summarize what we have discussed till now, I think iceberg is a classic metaphor. So if you see here, 10% is what we normally see as product managers, right? We are obsessed about the UI, we are obsessed about the features we are trying to build, about the launch date in particular, right? That this needs to get launched on coming Monday, and these three features are going along in a single deployment, or we are trying to make some UI tweaks in the journey. But if you want to build scalable products, right, which would last for a longer duration, can be scaled across other platforms or geographies or a different bunch of users, we need to see the 90%, right? Because if this 90% is not stable or robust, then whenever you're trying to scale something, it will fail. So the underlying things which need to be considered is how robust is the architecture. Is my server capable of handling those extra traffics if I scale this? Is my ops or the reports or the reconciliations that we have in place, are they adequate to scale, or are they adequate if I move this to a different, expand this particular product to a different cohort altogether? Is my underlying architecture, ops, reconciliation process, or compliance in place? Whether my unit economics, which I touched upon earlier also, like what is the profit margin that I'm making by actually delivering a single product or delivering a single order? Are those unit economics fitting into my long-term scalability plan or sustainable development? And then are there any underlying risks in the market which I need to take consideration? So I think this is how we should think about scaling any new product. Of course, those 10% are important because we need to align on a launch date. We need to align on the features, but I think the remaining 90% has equal importance and needs to be considered if you want to scale this product, right? Principles from the field, I think this we have already covered, but since these are the four major points which are emerging out of today's session, I'd like to reiterate those, like define the problem which I'm trying to solve, right? It can be a customer problem or maybe an in-house problem. Distinguish between wants and needs, and then define the unit economics. Scale the system, not just the features, right? And then account for the environment. As I briefly touched upon, like you need to visit the environment. You need to actually see, like if I want to build something, what is the end-to-end uh, development that needs to be done. Otherwise, what would happen is maybe you built a new app, but your supply chain is failing, or maybe you promote a new feature like delivery management system, but you don't have a dedicated or a marketplace model in place so that every order can be fulfilled with the same experience for customers. And then this the fourth point, which is like trust. It makes more relevance in the fintech sector, because once you lose the trust of your customer, it's very difficult to regain that. With that, I come to my concluding slide, which is like, I'm sure like as you'll be completing your MBA from IIM Indore, this is actually those set of people who will define the work systems in future, right? You'll be leading certain teams, you'll be designing them, right? And then the systems that you will design, make sure that you eventually shape, I mean, those products in a way so that it can be scaled to millions of lives, right? Because you are actually defining the user experience for millions of customers. So build fast, but ensure that you build with integrity. I'll just take a pause here to understand if there are any questions, any queries that you have. I'll be happy to take those.
Um, thank you for the talk, sir. I have a question. While being a product manager in general, I think one of the main issue anyone would get is like prioritizing which feature, which exact feature to be put forward. So what helped you to prioritize the features? Like, I mean, definitely the frameworks and all, but which one would you use in general?
Sure. So I think good question, Alekhya. So see, there can be multiple scenarios, right? Of course, the frameworks are in place, but then what happens is maybe there is a uh, upcoming event, right? And your leadership comes and says to you, like, see, we want to launch this product, right, in the upcoming event, which may not be part of your prioritized list or your sprint planning. But then you have to do certain course corrections, right? Because there will be always certain changes that may come up. But these are ad hoc requests, right? So if something comes from your leadership, then definitely you have to prioritize that, right? You have to do certain course corrections. But these are, as I mentioned, like these are off incidences, right? But if I'm leading a product, then first and foremost, I think I should have adequate access to data. Data should be your first friend. If you don't have access to data, then you'll be building something out of hypothesis, right? But then if you have absolute clarity, like this is something what I built because this is what my data is reflecting. My customers are complaining that there is a lot of payment issues, or the app crashes midway, or maybe someone is facing problems with adding an item to the cart, right? And it can be extended for other industries as well. Like think of a fintech industry where maybe uh, the payment takes a lot of time to get completed. So once you have an access to the data, you can define like, is this problem faced by all customers or a handful of customers? Now you already have an idea of the reach, right? The first factor which we discussed in the RISE framework. Second is like, what is the impact that I'm trying to change? And always map this with numbers. Don't do something like, I want to improve the payment experience. Now this is an incomplete statement. You need to say like, I need to improve the payment failures or reduce the payment failures by 2%. Now you have an actionable data, right? And after the product get released, you can actually measure, like my earlier payment failures were 10%. Now we have reduced it to 7%. So I have meet that success criteria. Otherwise, every product launch will seem like a success. Now, once you have prioritized basis the reach, basis the impact that you're trying to make, and then also taking into consideration what is the effort, right, you are putting to make that change, you can accordingly prioritize like which feature needs to go first and which can sit in your backlog and be part of a later release, right? As we have learned in MBA also, like how to distinguish between a need and a want, right? So needs need to be fulfilled first, wants can come later, because these are good to have things.
And also, as someone who wants to get into product management, is there any suggestion that you would give? Like, is there any books or resources that you would suggest for people who want to get into
See, I
product
think there are
management?
multiple forums now available, right? You can just Google and find out a few forums, right? You can definitely be part of those forums, so that what would happen is eventually you actually start thinking on similar lines, right? But I don't think there is any mantra or golden rule to become a product manager. Anyone who is obsessed about customer satisfaction has a inclination of, because nowadays if you see, there are multiple product managers, right? One of course is a technical product manager, other there are functional product managers also. So I feel like definitely you need to know some bit of technical understanding, so that you can actually deliberate those asks or maybe part of those discussions with the tech team. But that said, it doesn't require someone to have an absolute coding knowledge or something. If you even ask about me, right, I didn't start my career as a developer, right? But with due modesty, I must say, like, I can now have healthy debates with solution architects, right? So definitely I don't feel like it's very requisite or mandatory. But that said, you need to have some knowledge of a technical background, so that you can have those discussions with your team.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think that is all the questions we have, sir.
Okay.
I would like to conclude with a word of thanks. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So, on behalf of the Alumni Committee, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to Mr. Aniruddha Chowdhury for taking the time to join us today and share his valuable insights. The session on building scalable products in QSR and FinTech provided a clear and practical perspective on how product leaders can balance scale, customer experience, and operational complexity. Drawing from your experience across high-volume consumer businesses and FinTech platforms, you highlighted how strong product strategy and data-driven decision-making and cross-functional collaboration are critical to building resilient and growth-oriented products. The real-world examples and frameworks you shared made the session highly engaging and insightful for all of us. I would like to thank Professor Manish Bopli, Chair, Alumni Affairs, for his continued guidance and support. A special word of appreciation for the Alumni Office, whose dedicated efforts behind the scenes made today's session possible. Finally, I would like to thank our audience for your enthusiastic participation and thoughtful questions. We look forward to welcoming you again at the next session of Wisdom, Pragnya, the Alumni Talk Series. Thank you once again and have a wonderful evening ahead.
Thank you, Tanvi. Thank you, everyone.